Anything to report from the break, ladies and gentlemen? All right, very good. If the Commonwealth will call its next witness.
Yes, ma'am. It's going to be Lieutenant Steve Lacefield.
If you'll take a seat, please. And if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
Stephen Lacefield.
And how are you employed? How are you employed? Where do you work?
I'm a lieutenant for the Louisville Metro Police Department.
And how long have you been with Louisville Metro Police Department?
14 or 15 years.
Okay. Do you have an assigned role within the department?
I do. I'm the Firearms Training Center commander.
Okay. And where is that located?
4201 Algonquin Parkway.
Okay. And is that where the range is?
It is.
Okay. What type of training did you receive prior to becoming an instructor with LMPD?
Multiple trainings, more than I can remember off the top of my head, but I attended to receive my certification, the Kentucky Department of Criminal Justice Training Firearms Instructor course, as well as their Law Enforcement Instructor Development course.
So extensive instruction specifically speaking to firearms?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Back in 2019, were you an instructor with the Firearms Division of LMPD?
I was.
Okay. And back at that time, how many trainings on average would you give per year?
2 qualifications per year, spring and fall. Spring is an on-duty qualification with no training. That's just with your Class A service pistol. Fall is an 8-hour training day. There's roughly half hour to 45 minutes of actual handgun training given at that, and the rest of it is qualifying, going through scenarios on a simulator that year from what I remember.
Okay. And are officers required to do those 2 courses or trainings per year?
Yes.
Every year that they're on duty with LMPD?
Yes, state law mandates once a year. If somebody's off on administrative leave, FMLA, things of that nature, light duty, and they're off longer than 6 months, they would come back and do a return to duty qualification. So they could miss a qualification, miss one of those, and still be legally covered as a peace officer in the state of Kentucky.
But it's an ongoing basis that they have to continue to qualify?
Yes.
As part of those qualifications, are you familiar with the standard operating procedures of LMPD as it pertains to your section of firearms?
I am.
And are you familiar with the use of force section as it pertains to firearms?
I am.
I believe that is section 9, is that correct?
I believe so. I cannot quote it verbatim.
Okay, but you are familiar with it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And within that, does it teach, or as an instructor, do you personally teach the levels of force that are to be used in a situation?
No, we don't.
Do you, in that capacity, teach the levels of force as it pertains to deadly force and when it may be used?
Typically not. That would be covered at the in-service training. Our training academy is broken into 3 bureaus. Basic training that handles our new hires, recruits, in-service training for sworn officers, and Firearms Training Center. My unit focuses primarily on the skill and or tactic of deploying the firearm. use of force, policy and laws taught at the basic and in-service level. It's rare that we would go over that.
Okay. As a firearm instructor, you are familiar with it, though?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the use of deadly force and when that is a option, are you familiar with when that should be used?
I am.
And when is that?
If in defense of your life or another's life, if you're in fear of imminent death, serious physical injury, kidnapping, or sexual intercourse by force.
Okay. And what is an officer required to articulate at any time why they use deadly force?
Yes, throughout the interview and investigation, they are.
Is a target and a background required for deadly force to be used?
It is.
And why is that important?
For a plethora of reasons that we could go on for quite some time over, but if I am in fear for my life or in fear for someone else's life, I need something tangible to be afraid of. First and foremost, there has to be something physically that I need to stop doing whatever it is doing. Also, with discharging a firearm, you're responsible for every round, or accountable for every round.
The officer is accountable for every round they fire.
Yes.
When an officer fires, are they ever taught that they should fire into the side of a building?
That they're,
Without a view of any sort?
if you don't have a view, no.
Okay. In your training and experience, does LMPD ever teach a method called suppressive fire?
No.
And for the jury, what is suppressive fire?
I can give a hypothetical example. If I am taking fire, or I'm with you guys and we're taking fire from over there and I want to move you out that door, suppressive fire would be me putting rounds in that direction towards where the incoming fire is coming from in order to keep their heads down and safely evacuate you all.
And LMPD does not instruct on that?
No, sir.
Okay. There's a term that is in some of the procedures of LMPD when it comes to the use of deadly force and other things of firearms, and that's isolation and background. What does that mean?
So as it relates to sight picture, you have sight alignment and sight picture. Sight alignment on if we're talking about a handgun, you have a front and a rear sight. The rear sight has a notch in it or a U, and the front sight is a blade, so you align those. That is sight alignment. Equal space to the left and right and on the same plane height-wise. Sight picture is placement of properly aligned sights onto a target. So using sight alignment, sight picture, placing that on a target, that is isolation.
And is that required before someone discharges a firearm?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the service weapon that LMPD typically uses, especially in the past prior to 2020, which is a .40 caliber Glock Model 22?
I am.
How many times do you estimate that you've shot a Glock Model 22?
Ballpark in excess of 50,000 rounds.
Are you familiar with how long it may take to unload or fully shoot a completely loaded magazine through that?
So 15 round magazine, fully loaded, 3 to 5 seconds.
3 to 5 seconds? And what is fully loaded on that type of duty service weapon? What is that? How many rounds does that cover?
Up to 16.
16? Okay. think, Lieutenant Lacefield, that's all the questions I have for you at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Matthews?
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant, did you personally participate in any of Brett Hankison's 2019 qualifying sessions?
I did not.
Are you aware of how he did on those?
I'm not,
Okay.
other than passing.
My understanding is that the officer has to shoot a certain number of rounds, and those are scored, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they have to achieve a certain score to pass?
Yes, sir.
And I think they get up to, 3 opportunities to pass?
In the past, they have unlimited at this point. So if you fail the qualification 3 times in a row, you're offered 8 hours remedial training and another 3 attempts until you pass.
Okay. Are you aware of Brett Hankison ever having failed a qualifying round?
I'm not.
Now, you talked about having a sight picture, correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever been in a gunfight yourself?
No, sir.
So you wouldn't have any idea how somebody might react in that kind of situation, correct?
None at all.
When an officer is ready to discharge his weapon, he's required to have this sight picture, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that requires some time to get that, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any information that Brett Hankison was doing what's called suppression firing on March the 13th?
Do I have any indication?
Any information that he was?
No, sir.
I mean, you were asked about suppression firing. Is that like when you see Chicago PD or cowboy movies when somebody's behind a rock covering somebody else, just firing?
Yeah, that could be.
Do you have any indication that Brett Hankison was doing that on March 13th?
None at all.
And would it be a correct statement that officers are taught, once they put their finger on that trigger and decide to discharge that weapon, that they should continue to fire that weapon until the threat is stopped?
Yes, sir.
And officers are also taught, I believe, to shoot center mass, correct?
Correct.
What is center mass?
The center of the upper thoracic region on a human torso.
And are there situations where that's not possible, to your knowledge?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at your range, do officers do simulated type of situations, or shoot, don't shoot kind of things?
Like scenarios?
Scenarios, yes.
From time to time, yes, sir.
And you never do any kind of live fire scenarios, correct?
With recruits, we do. Within service, in the 3+ years that I've been there, we have not.
And when I say live fire, I mean using actual bullets?
Yes, sir.
You do use actual bullets with recruits?
Yes.
You ever lose any that way?
Well, they're not shooting at one another, sir.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. I mean,
Okay.
what are they shooting at? They're shooting at targets?
Photo real targets, and we use simunition as well.
Okay.
So simunition is force on force.
Okay.
Um,
And that can't ever duplicate what you might run into in the field where you're in an actual gun battle with somebody, is that correct?
No, sir. It helps, but there's no amount of training to prepare you for that. You can become inoculated to a certain point where you're comfortable with it. But I don't know that anybody could ever say that they've had enough training to really feel good about that.
And when you say the rule is that you have to have a target in sight before you discharge your weapon, that's pretty standard rule, is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, would you agree with me that sometimes the rule about rules is that there are exceptions to them?
In some cases, I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Well, what I'm getting at is if Brett Hankison's out at 3003 Springfield Drive, and his brother officer, John Mattingly, just gets shot and almost executed, would it be appropriate for him to return fire even if he can't actually see the target, to try to protect his brother officer?
Per our policy, no.
Per your policy, I thought you just said the deadly force policy was that you're allowed to use deadly force to protect yourself, your fellow officers, and civilians or citizens.
Yes, sir.
So Brett Hankison was not justified in discharging his weapon?
I don't know enough about the case to make the determination whether Detective Hankison was justified or not.
Okay. How about this? Would you agree with me that there are no absolutes in law enforcement, just like in anything else?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Excuse me. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the term tunnel vision?
I am.
What does that mean to you?
Incredibly focused. So, loss of peripheral. If I get tunnel vision and I'm looking at you, odds are I'm not going to see to the left or the right. I'm going to be so focused on you, I involuntarily occlude surroundings.
And have you ever been in a situation where you've gotten tunnel vision?
Yes, sir.
When was that?
I can't begin to count the number of times that that's happened.
And I believe you testified that the Glock 40 millimeter handgun that LMPD officers carry has a magazine that holds 15 rounds?
It's 40 caliber, and yes, sir,
40
15
caliber,
rounds.
15 rounds. And you testified, how long does it take to discharge a fully loaded?
Average
weapon?
shooter, 3 to 5 seconds.
And that's just put your finger on the trigger one time and leave it there, correct?
You leave it placed on the trigger, you reset the trigger each time.
Okay, you have to squeeze it each time to discharge.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Lieutenant, you've kind of suggested here in your testimony that if Brett Hankison didn't have a target, that he did something wrong in this situation. Is that correct?
I'm not making any suggestions either way.
You're all right, Jeff.
Yeah, let's approach.
Okay, Lieutenant, you were not on the scene at 3003 Springfield Drive, right?
Correct.
And you don't profess to have any inside knowledge or any knowledge at all about what occurred out there on March the 13th, shortly after midnight?
I know what happened, but as far as the specifics, I have went to great lengths to avoid looking at case files, photos. I haven't driven by the scene.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else of this witness? All right, thank you. You can step down.
Yes, ma'am.
Your next witness?
Jason Grissom.
If you'll take a seat, please. And if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. You may take your mask off while you're testifying if you wish to. You're not required to.
Thank you.
State your name, please,
Jason Grissom.
and how are you employed?
I'm employed by Louisville Metro Police.
And how long have you been with the department?
Nearly 22 years.
What is your position?
I am the commander of the LMPD training division.
And how long have you been in that position?
It was late June, so I don't know, 7-8 months. Not too long.
So you are familiar with the requirements for training of all Louisville Metro Police officers,
Sure. Yes.
and including the training required by the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council,
Yes.
the Department of Criminal Justice Training, and the Louisville Metro Police Department itself.
Exactly. Yep.
And were you asked to look at the, and obtain the training transcripts of the defendant, former Detective Brett Hankison?
Yes.
Are you familiar with his, the length of time he was with the department?
It was approximately 20 years. I can tell you exactly, but.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked Commonwealth's Exhibit 144.
Got it. Thank you.
And is that the training transcript of the defendant from the Louisville Metro Police Department?
Yes, this is the transcript that we have in our records. Correct.
And now I'm going to hand you Commonwealth Exhibit 145. Is that training transcript from the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council?
Yes, it's from the Department of, well, it actually says from the Department of Criminal Justice Training.
Yes.
But yes, but
And what-
associated, yes.
Explain what is the Department of Criminal Justice Training?
So effectively, the Department of Criminal Justice Training is the Central State Police Training Academy. The state operates or allows LMPD to have their own academy. Lexington has their own academy. Bowling Green and the Kentucky State Police have their own academy. And the one that the state operates is called the Department of Criminal Justice Training. The body that kind of governs the curriculum and the training for all the academies is the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council. It's a separate entity. We refer to that as KLEC.
So the Department of Criminal Justice Training actually does training,
Yes.
and whereas the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council is responsible for approving training?
Right, approving training, they're the administrative body that would approve the training and approve instructors. They have a couple other duties as well, but for training purposes, that's what's
And so the
important to us.
Kentucky Law Enforcement Council would have to approve trainings conducted by Louisville Metro,
Yes,
and in fact, even approve the actual curriculum for a training.
exactly. That's the first step, get the curriculum approved, and that's what the state says we can teach. Exactly.
Now, is there a minimum number of hours each year that a law enforcement officer has to have continued training?
Yes, 40 hours
40 hours per year?
per year, per annual year.
Now, is this in addition to the firearms qualification?
State requires us to qualify with firearms, not train, but qualify. So the qualify is different from the actual training, yes. So that 40 hours would be in addition to qualifying with the duty weapon.
And how many times a year is an officer required to qualify with the duty weapon?
2 times a year.
2 times a year. And one of those times includes training in addition to just the qualification?
It can't, that is LMPD's, that is kind of, I'm not gonna say it's been our policy, that's our practice.
Okay.
At one time would be what we call an on-duty qualification, where we would show up at the range at a pre-designated time, you would qualify and then go back to your normal duty. In practice, we'd also like to do another one during the year where the officers come in and they will conduct some type of informal training and then qualify as well. That training, though, it is important to point out, is not always KLEC certified. So it's just training that we as a department put on in addition to the required 40 hours.
Okay. If you would look at the transcript for the Louisville Metro Police Department, I think that is Exhibit 144.
Ms. Van 144?
Yes. Now, when did the defendant attend the Basic Recruit Academy?
Says he began December the 6th, 1999, graduated, or the end date of March the 14th, 2000 for 640 hours.
640 hours. So how many months is that, or weeks?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
Give me a calculator.
It's several weeks,
Several
months,
weeks, yes.
3 months then? Well, from December 99 to March,
You know, about-
it looks like it's over 3 months.
About 3
then.
months, 3.5 months. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the process of actually the comprehensive training of a law enforcement, of an individual to be a law enforcement officer.
I'm not understanding your question. Could you explain again, please?
This is the basic course that a person who is not a law enforcement officer has to go through in order to become one.
Correct.
Is that correct?
At that time, and I believe it was the Jefferson County Police Department is what that is reflecting. So that would have been the Jefferson County Police Department's Basic Recruit Academy or DOCJT's. I don't know which one he went through.
Well, the defendant actually, before he came to Louisville, worked at Lexington Metro.
Okay. That would explain the hour difference. Each academy can have their own basic curriculum, so the hours may vary.
And any of the academies has to be approved by Kentucky Law Enforcement Council.
Absolutely.
Right. So 3 months of basic training, and that would, of course, include firearms use of firearms,
I would assume at the time it is the same as it is now. That would be correct.
and the safe use of firearms would be obviously included in that. Now, looking at that transcript of Louisville Metro, we see fall firearms qualification, spring firearms. This is going back to 2004. We see there, just looking down, another training in 2004 on taser. In 2005, again, fall firearms training. A training in 2005 on street level investigation. How many hours was that training in 2005 on street level investigation?
2005 was a 40-hour class, so 1 week.
Okay. In 2006, a training on resistance control tactics. And how many hours was that?
That shows 8 hours. 1 day.
Moving on to 2007, a training on street level investigations. How many hours was that?
The
2000
one,
November
the one in
2000.
November of 2007 was 40 hours. 1 week.
Moving into 2000, well, of course, 2007 also included firearms qualification. In 2008, RMS training. Do you know what that is?
In 2008.
November of 2008.
I'm guessing. I don't know for certain, but it sounds like record management system.
Okay. And then 2009, flex platoon training.
That's that when March of 2009, flex platoon, 40 hours.
And what's flex platoon training?
I've never seen this curriculum. The flex platoon was it was usually like a narcotics squad in the division levels that would do some type of street level investigations.
Okay.
I don't know. I never saw that class.
Okay. And you were subpoenaed to bring these records, were you not? You were subpoenaed to be here today to testify about the training that the defendant has undergone.
Yes.
Now, into 2000, still in 2009, a DUI update. No, that's 2010. A DUI update in 2010. How many hours was that? DUI update, February 2010.
There it is, February 22nd, 16 hours, 2 days.
Also in 2010, another flex platoon training, and that's 32 hours.
That was a 32-hour block, yes.
And so the rest of the page goes down through 2010, 2011, 2012, trainings, a number of trainings that this defendant participated in. And obviously, to be on the transcript means he passed the training. He got credit for those hours.
Yes, that'd be correct.
One of the trainings listed in 2012 of June for 40 hours, resistance control for patrol. You see that one?
Yes, 40-hour class?
Yes.
Ma'am.
Do you have any idea what that would be? Resistance control.
You don't happen to have the curriculum available?
I mean, I'm just asking you of your knowledge as in the training division, what would resistance control include? Training.
My guess would be that resistance
Judge, I'll
control.
object to him guessing. If he knows, he knows. If he doesn't know, he doesn't know.
Sustained.
Okay. The next training listed in 2012 for 8 hours. Law enforcement officers killed and assaulted.
Yes, 8-hour class in August.
Okay. Every year after 2012, of course, we see 2 listings for firearms qualifications, one in the spring and one in the fall. And in 2015, there's April of 2015, a 16-hour course in officer survival. You see that one?
Yes, 16-hour, April the
Okay.
4th, or, sorry, April the 8th, yes.
Okay. Now, moving into more recent years, beginning in September of 2018, Canine weekly narcotics training.
Yes,
And those appear to be weekly for
Yes.
a number of months, going on up through 2020. And in fact, up through March 11th, 2020, and that's the last training listed on this transcript, March 11th, 2020, 8 hours canine narcotics detection training.
yes.
Okay. Of course, I didn't read all the trainings listed on this transcript. Also obtained from KLEC, which I handed you as Exhibit 146, from Kentucky Law Enforcement Council, are some of the curriculum, some of these trainings, the actual curriculum that was used in what, Exhibit 146. Do you have that?
You mean 145?
Oh, I'm sorry. Handing you
Thank you.
Exhibit 146.
Yes, ma'am.
If you want to look
Yes,
at that. I believe on the front page of that packet is a list that includes the curriculum of specific trainings.
yes.
Can you
See that.
read which specific trainings are included in that packet?
Be happy to. Okay, this has the first bullet point, Brett Hankison training history. Next is 1361-09M Police Training Officers Program. Next, 1694-11AR Law Enforcement Officers Killed and Assaulted. Next bullet point, 190413M Active Shooter Response. Next is 1995-14M Officer Survival. 2127-16M 2017 In-Service Training, Community Interaction and Recognition Training. And the final one is 2281-19M 2019 Favorable Outcome Response Training, FORT, in service.
40 hours.
40,
And now, if you would look at if you would turn to the curriculum development form for the active shooter response training,
for active shooter, sure will.
which was 32 hours.
Guess it's back here a little bit. And here it is, found it here, yes.
And so that actually sets out the curriculum that was used in the active shooter response training of 32 hours.
Yes,
So on page 5 of that curriculum, well, let's start with page 3, which would be the schedule of the
Page 3.
curriculum.
yes, ma'am.
And so the schedule includes live scenarios. You see that? There are live scenarios for the active shooter response training on day one.
On day one, let's see,
Team
team configuration, traits, fitness, equipment.
Okay, just go ahead and read down through what would be in that day one.
ASAP overview and history. Next would be team configuration, traits, fitness, and equipment. Exterior movement, lunch, exterior movement.
Above that, it says Warrior 101. Do you not see that?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm on something.
Go ahead and finish then. Do you see live scenarios?
No, ma'am, I don't.
Okay,
Are we looking at the same thing? I've got active shooter response.
yes. Go on then to page 5.
The one that says objectives at the top. We're looking at
Yes.
the same one? Yes, ma'am.
So, included in objectives, do you see, well, why don't you just read what the objectives?
Sure. Do you want me to go through each individual line or just the titles of each
Well,
section?
what would be the goal of the overview, section
Sure.
2?
So, ASAP overview history is the name of this block. 1.1, given a course schedule, the student will be able to describe the content of the course. And 1.2, given the case studies, the student will be able to list historical characteristics of actor shooter response scenarios.
Okay. So, moving over to page 7. Do you see a section on there called live scenarios?
No, ma'am, on my page 7, it says scene stabilization in multiple rooms.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead and for scene stabilization.
Sure.
Okay, scene stabilization, 3-hour block. Without reference, define improvised explosive devices as discussed in class. Without the reference, list 4 dangers associated with IEDs at a tactical scene as discussed in class. Given a tactical scenario, list the steps in evaluating an IED in a tactical scene as discussed in class. Next, without reference, list and demonstrate 2 methods of marking IEDs as discussed in class. Without reference, list 3 considerations and demonstrate an evacuation of persons away from an IED as discussed in class. Without reference, prioritize scene stabilization considerations as defined in class. And the last objective, given a mock scenario, determine the location of a suitable casualty collection point as defined in class.
I'm going to hand you now, that's Mark Comwell's Exhibit 147. Now, is that also a curriculum for another active shooter response?
Yes, it is.
And so if you would turn to page 5 on that one. And what does it say?
My page 5, objectives, it's got an orientation, ASAP, overview history, team configuration, traits, fitness equipment, and Warrior 101. The main
And now
blocks.
go to page 7. And what, does that contain sections detailing live scenarios?
Yes, number 7, live scenarios, foot approach.
Okay, and go ahead and read some of the live scenarios.
Yes, ma'am. During this session, the student will operate in a team environment with simunition training equipment. Approach
What, I'm sorry, operate with what?
Operate in a team environment with simunition training equipment.
What's simunition training equipment?
So simunition is it is a brand that makes it's a life-size, almost completely functional handgun, except in shooting, instead of shooting live rounds, it shoots what's effectively a paintball projectile instead of a metal or lead projectile. That way, it is It's painful if it hits you, but it is not dangerous. It will explode like a paintball, leave a little mark, but we can use it much safer in a training environment than we could ever use a live handgun or live ammunition.
Okay, and additional live scenarios in this training?
I'm sorry.
Additional live scenarios?
Yes, we continue with that?
Yes.
Yes. Next block, approach a target site on foot in a team formation 4 times, different scenarios. That's in parentheses. Next block, neutralize, capture a suspect outside of a target site. Understanding, controlling the flow and pace movement of a team in a dynamic situation. Understand the benefit of role players in a scenario-based training. Understand the strengths and weaknesses of a foot approach. And finally, demonstrate safe weapon handling skills in a dynamic environment.
Okay. And that training was how many hours? That active shooter training? Active shooter response training?
The whole course is a 32-hour course, so a 4-day course.
And the defendant attended that course?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you would refer to the other transcript, which was, I believe, Exhibit 145,
Yes.
the transcript actually of the defendant from Kentucky Law Enforcement Council. And this transcript, unlike the other one, starts out with the more recent trainings. And this is a separate transcript from the one at Louisville Metro
Correct.
that he attended.
Yes.
So on this training transcript, if you would look down at a training titled, on June 10th, 2019, titled Favorable Outcome Response Training,
Yes.
and he attended that.
Yes.
And how many hours was that training?
The favorable outcome response, 16 hours.
And do you know what that training consists of by Louisville Metro?
That 16-hour block had some stuff. It had some training on legal updates, American Disabilities Act. That's the 2 things off the top of my head that I remember.
Favorable outcome response?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a couple other blocks, and I apologize, I don't remember what they were off the top of my head.
On the second page of this transcript in April of 2018, if you want to refer to that, page 2,
Yes.
April of 2018, fitness and individual tactics in service.
Yes.
And that was how many hours?
32 hours.
Okay. Moving on down to March of 2016, almost halfway down that transcript, is a 40-hour training called Crisis Intervention Training. You see that one?
Yes.
And so he attended and passed that one in March of 2016,
Yes, 40-hour class.
which would be obviously training in how to respond to crisis. Crisis intervention.
Crisis intervention, but with specifically for people with mental illness.
And where do you see that?
I just know the training because I've done it
And so people with mental illness who are
in crisis.
in a situation needing intervention.
Yes, somebody that's in crisis that needs police help, yes.
The training in October 2015, 16 hours, states LMPD stops Do you know what that training is?
Yes, it deals with traffic stops, low risk, medium risk, high risk vehicle stops.
So when an officer stops a vehicle,
Yes,
how to respond to both low risk, mid risk, and high risk stops.
yes,
So would high risk stops involve the potential that someone who the officer stops may have a gun
yes,
and may actually respond
yes,
with shooting a gun?
yes, exactly, yes.
The training on page 3 of this transcript, in May of 2009, tactical patrol skills for the police mountain bike cyclist. Do you know what that involved?
It's a 40-hour class that looks like the police officer mountain bike course.
Do you know what that would
Mainly riding a bike a whole lot. There is a section on there about using your having to draw your gun or having to arrest a person that may be combative, and having how to deal with that and like what to do with your bike.
Okay.
So there is a section that's somewhat tactical.
Okay.
The rest of it, I'm sorry, the rest, just to explain my answer fully, the class is also mainly about how to ride a bicycle in an urban setting over bumps and steps and how not to fall down and.
But also includes how to use your weapon.
Yes, that is part of it too, yes.
Okay, and this transcript goes on for 2 more pages, each page with a list of trainings attended and passed by the defendant, going back to January of 2000. Well, it actually also lists the basic recruit police basic training, September 99 to March 2000. And that's on page 4 of this transcript. And so this does indicate where the defendant attended basic training, and what does this indicate?
Lexington, Kentucky.
Lexington Metro?
Lexington Academy, yes.
Okay. The Commonwealth at this time moves to introduce exhibits 144 through 147,
No objection.
All right, they'll be so admitted.
and that's all the questions I have.
Right, cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Major, it would appear from exhibits 145, 146, and 147 that Brett Hankison's a pretty highly trained police officer. Would you agree?
I would say that based on his time of service, that this is a normal amount that a 20-year officer would have.
Okay. And are you familiar with any of the courses that you've discussed here, content?
Some I'm very familiar with and others I'm not.
Okay. Are you familiar with any part of an active shooting course that specifically teaches you what to do when your partner has been shot by an active shooter?
As far as that curriculum is concerned, only what I see here in the curriculum. I never attended this class.
And you spent some time talking about IED course. What's that?
An improvised explosive device.
What I thought. Okay, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Anything else of this witness? You can step down, thank you. All right, and your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor, it's going to be former interim chief Robert Schroeder.
If you'll take a seat, please.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you'll raise your right hand.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may take your mask off while you're testifying if you wish to, but you're not required to.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you just please state your name for the record?
I am Robert Schroeder.
And how are you employed?
Currently, I serve as a part-time commissioner for the city of Meadowvale.
Okay. And previously, how long were you previously employed with Louisville Metro Police Department?
I was employed with Louisville Metro Police for 23 years.
Okay. And what roles did you finally retire as, or did you leave the department back in your previous employment?
I ended my career as the interim chief of police,
Okay. And what year was that when you ended?
2020.
Okay. Back in March 12th and March 13th of 2020, were you in that role at that time?
I was the deputy chief of police.
Okay. And at some point, then closer to the springtime, in particular June or July, did you become the chief?
Yes, I became the interim chief in June of 2020.
Okay. And as the chief, do you review PIU case files?
Yes, you review PIU case files, public integrity case files, and professional standards case files.
Okay. And at some point in that time, as interim chief, did you review the PIU case file concerning the defendant here today, Brett Hankison?
I did.
And what did you review in that case?
I received a hard drive from the Public Integrity Unit, and I reviewed a series of investigative notes, statements, videos, photographs, those sorts of things that were on the drive.
So you reviewed the case,
I did.
and what
Or
were your
I should say the case as it was at that point.
Okay. And what were your findings after your review of that case?
To which I object.
Would you approach, please? All right, ladies and gentlemen, a legal issue has arisen that's going to take us a little bit of time to sort through, and we don't want you to just sit here, especially since it's already 10 till 5. So we're going to go ahead and recess for the evening so that we have time to discuss this thoroughly, and then we will return tomorrow morning at 9:30 for further testimony in the trial. As I told you, though, we also are going to be going to the scene. That will be tomorrow afternoon. You will be transported there and obviously back here. I just want to let you know that so that you wear appropriate outerwear, appropriate shoes. You've been told what the demographics of the scene are, so I think you're somewhat aware that it's an apartment complex. It's apartments that are on the first floor, so I don't think there's really going to be any steps involved, but I think you are going to be asked to be both in front of the apartment building and at the back of the apartment building, so you may be off of the sidewalk into some grassy area as well. So just so you know all of those things. So I will see you here tomorrow morning at 9:30, and please recall the separation admonition. Thank you. Have a nice night.
All rise for the pledge of allegiance.